Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. My gender pronouns is she or her, and POI preference just through the chat. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Having your voice represented sounds amazing, but it doesn't mean that the student executive body has the capacity to agree with the entire views of these students inside university alone, especially when it's an abstract form of demonstration, excluding the terms and and anything that matters with tertiary education. We don't think they should be allowed to express their political views on that matter alone. There's two main points of setup then on what we're going to do on side proposition. First of all, within a student executive body should express their political views that is not in line with what goes on with their tertiary education. Because notice the purpose of student executive bodies. Sure, it is to represent the student's view, but we don't want students to go on riots or demonstrations on the streets. It is not going to be a good option for these students when it brings up the university fame, regardless of not having a consensus and a unanimous decision of representing the students' voices and opinion inside a university. But secondly, we did other counterfactuals to represent political views already exist in status quo, such as social media that triggers social discourses. Social movements exist to lobby the government, for instance, including the issues that correlates with policies, politicians, like political parties, and etc. I.e., if you want to support minorities, we think that progressive social movements already exist. If you want to opt for labor rights, we think labor union already exists to help you represent your voices at the end of the day. If students want to go and have their senses and voices heard, they can still participate in other movements as well. It doesn't have to be through student executive body, which is why check and balance will still exist at the end of the day. Opposition can say that we're only silencing these people and we're only silencing the students exactly because there are other movements who can help you represent these voices. But two main things then in my speech. Firstly, on the principle of representation, but secondly, on why will political discussion still exist under our side. But firstly, then on the principle of representation. I would just like to quickly frame that education institution is supposed to stay neutral at all costs, knowing that the spectrums of university students is so diverse, political views are never going to only exist in one scope. Exactly when university has to cater towards these different types of perspectives politics, and when student executive body is constructed to represent these voices, it is not going to be strategic for a serious social issue to be discussed and go rioting for, exactly when the impact of the demonstration is not direct and tangible towards these students, when it does not correlate with tertiary education. It doesn't have any correlation with how these students is going to operate inside the university life. Exactly when the problem is that when you demonstrate according to the students' executive body, you bring your university theme, even when debate still exists within the university and within the students as well, which is why it's not going to be a right form of representation when you're unable to convey all the messages in your university or even the university students at the end of the day. We get a comparatively under our side of the house, if students are rioting based on policies or political icons that instead correlates with tertiary education, then at the very least, even if we have diverse opinion, then at the very least, there is more sense of relatability for society to project their opinions and voices in regards to that issue. This is a better form of representation. Why? Because tertiary education policy is simply a war between university student and the government. We think that the collective agreement is more in line for the students inside the institution itself, i.e. setting new regulations for how academic tests would be conducted inside university is way more relatable to university students comparatively with issues of labor rights that is not in line and not the problem of these university students at the end of the day. We can compare it with other issues which remain abstract. The agreement that you have within the students alone is not going to be inclusive, which is why we don't think the student executive body should be the only organization that represents and that tries to convey their political views towards our people at the end. But even if they want to help with the individuals, like these university students are still allowed to join other movements as well. They're not going to be restricted to join other movements to do so. So if it is just not allowed to lead demonstration on behalf of their university name, exactly when representation is not going to be concise at the end. Which is why check and balance will still exist at the end of the day, meaning the opposition can come up and say it will limit the students' freedom of speech choices. We still have the option to do so. Before moving on to my second argument, I'll take QI.
Will student body on your still part for crucial issues like vaccination and climate change?
Within, as long as it correlates with the tertiary education, then sure, they can go for it. But if it doesn't have the correlation with their university life, then no, they're not going to. The second argument then, why will political discussion still exist at the end? Within a political discussion can still happen regardless of student executive body being allowed to speak up about their political views because of 2 points of analysis. Firstly, because I think it is simply unfair for student executive bodies who have an imbalanced bargaining power and platform to express their political views to influence other university students exactly when their platform is that huge to begin with. But it only creates an echo chamber that political views towards these politicians or these political parties, etc., would inherently follow what the member of these student executive body are opting for. Because most likely, notice how under opposition side of the house, if demonstration happens, it happens exactly when it's driven by others and most likely the members of these student executive body. Therefore, we don't think choice is going to exist under opposition's world. People are most likely are going to fuel demonstration to happen in the first place. It is not because you agree or disagree with the policy that the government is trying to advocate for. Rather, it is because you are as a member of the student executive body. They tell you to go on riot, which is why you need to follow it exactly when you're a member of the organization itself. This is going to be bad exactly because the collateral damage of other repercussions of demonstrating will still happen towards the student outside of their consent. Notice how exactly because it is fueled by others, you never have the ultimate choice to choose whether or not you want to go on this riot, but you still have to do it exactly because you need to quote unquote represent the university and as well as the other students' voices. Yet the harms are still irreversible towards the students at the end of the day, which is why we think it falls very unfair for the students. But secondly, then, also think that on an alternative, if students do relate with the current issues that they're trying to advocate for, they can still represent their voice by joining other movements, right, without dragging their institution's name. Why is this better though? Because we think that with a more targeted movement, the goal of this demonstration will also be easier to achieve and will also be faster to achieve. Because government most likely will listen more to grassroots people or even these concise social movements for going rioting on the street when the protest comes to internal grievances, for example, right? Therefore, it generates more incentive for the government to change their policy or to become more accountable towards its people. Therefore, if opposition is concerned about the issue of vaccination, for instance, we think that other movements already exist to remind the government of the importance of vaccination itself. It doesn't have to be through student executive body to directly talk about it and directly express their political views towards the government. Therefore, I think the weighing is on 2 main points. First, within a demonstrating for something that has no correlation with the student is completely useless. Student executive body shouldn't be allowed to lead riots when it's not that urgent. But secondly, representation will also exist, but in forms of other counterfactuals, which is why political discussion can still happen, which is why we're so proud to propose.
Okay, thank you so much for that fine speech. Now I call upon the leader of opposition. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Right, thanks. My name is Real, no preferred gender pronoun, and I prefer POI through verbal. All right. Just to confirm one more time, is it audible?
Yes, you are.
All right, thank you. Student executive bodies in developing countries have historically been formed out of the anti-intellectual characters of states that seek to limit free speech. An example of this will be the Beyond Youth in the Philippines, supporting the distribution of reproductive health care, BLM student chapters supporting for Democrats, or Free Speech Unit in Russia supporting for Alexei Navalny. An example of Indonesia will be BEM Unair and BEM UI fighting against RUU PKS from the incumbent government, and etc. On opposition, we believe that these student bodies are important at representing specific individuals who have historically been oppressed or excluded from the political narrative, brought to oppose. 2 things in my speech with rebuttals integrated. First, how the politicization of student union act as a necessary defense for the vulnerable groups. Second, why does politicization raise positive awareness and education on our side of the house? First argument, how the politicization of students executive body act as a necessary defense for the vulnerable groups. Look, what happens to students on your side of the house who want to be political focal but cannot use the political union as an avenue? Two scenarios here. First, either they end up not engaging at all, or second, even if they do, it's a far more dangerous alternative. We will win this debate just by proving either scenario. First, I would suggest that you prevent your participation altogether on your side of the house or the government, because you as a student, you don't have the time capital to dedicate to an external political group, and therefore you are unlikely to engage in things like demonstration, petition, and etc. They are politically important for the vulnerable. Especially there's a gap in terms of age demographic between you and the traditional political party. Notice that the conference, when you have a student executive body, you have more incentive to join for three reasons. First, because given that it's run and coordinated by youth, there's a great sense of relatability based on age demographic. It mitigates the age demographic concern that exists. Second, there's more of an incentive for student leader or student body leaders to ask for your political leanings, specifically because you are the constituency. This means more education, more medical coverage, more information leads to more interest. And third, it's very accessible to you because it's within your university hall that you give to every day, and you do not have to be afraid of protesting in the street alone. There's an idea that you are not alone and you are backed by hundreds in the body, which means that it's going to be really better. But I think the second possible scenario is that this individual will seek more radical alternatives, right? The next most accessible type of political group are usually the most radical, who have the incentive to recruit in university grounds and therefore will play up your dissatisfaction as a student and weaponize them into violence for either further left or further right. I think this increases their likelihood to be put in the line of danger. How do we get better change on our side of the house? For such a reason, listen, this is our pathway to victory. At best case, they might claim that there are other ways for student opinions or student voices to be heard, which is by being independent activists, right? First, this assumes that their opinions and voices are fallible. So therefore, the question of this debate is, where do we get these voices recognized and integrated into political issues that consequently affect the lives of the very same students we are talking about? Second, we argue that it's on opposition where you are openly politicized, where it's easier to fight for your ability to be heard in society, because if you're just an independent activist or if you're just talking about political issue, you can easily be ignored and people cannot see that you are a significant bloc. Why? Normally, the youth is a scatter voting bloc and not vote on, for example, as a youth voting bloc in general. There are other external factors that pull them apart, like, for example, families dictating their political leaning, religious, for example, that is subscribed to, and etc. Notice that this separation is true because they have no mechanism of solidarity at this point in time. It was on our side of the house where you make them a relevant political bloc. They become a political concern to traditional politicians because first, there are a lot of them. There are many students in the country, but second, they are the most ideologically motivated. They are more likely to go door to door, be outspoken, most likely to influence the individual's proximity to them. But also third, even if they aren't gigantic political voting bloc, for example, they can become a swing voting bloc, and therefore politicians will still be changing their platform and policy to guarantee that the few percentage point that the youth vote has. But lastly, though, I would suggest that this group have a special discursive power. So why? They are students and live through the education system the same way that workers' unions have specialized knowledge on the industry and therefore relevant unions as well. I think that this entire argument is really important because A is a political bloc. The youth and the students have been disenfranchised, and this is the one way to assess their political power. Secondly, it acts as the defense against authoritarianism who may still try to attack free speech and the intellectualization of the masses. It's on our side of the house where they are more hesitant to do that because we have the power to do things like walkouts, go on rallies, etc. I think university students in particular demand things like transparency and the use of facts from the politicians, so it also improves the state of the political discourse that happens at the point at which they are engaged. But lastly, though, we would suggest that many instances, these people are more liberal, so if you want to be able to benefit people in groups like minorities, it happens the most when you put the forefront of the youth within the political sphere rather than relying individuals who have traditionally privileged from the current state of politics and will continue to exist on site government. Also, they talk about representation. This is a very weak argument. The problem with this claim is that there's no analysis why just because you don't represent the entire students' voices, you should be banned. Rachel, have you ever heard about democracy? Even democracy, which is considered as the best system in the world, doesn't always represent the entire human field because that's impossible. At least on our side of the house, we represent the majority interest. What's the comparative? You don't represent any interest of students because there's no platform supporting students to do so. Rachel, you damn representation, don't even talk about supporting it. Before I move on to my second argument, I have several framings though. The first thing that is suggesting that these student unions are not representative at all, within that we have already rebutted them before, right? And also second argument that, why does politicization raise positive awareness on our side of the house? First, Externally, politicization forces people to be aware for the fact that you are often mentioned in the news. Like, for example, BEM UI in the news, aware for the fact that things are going around you proximately, and your family and friends outside of school will often ask you about your political opinion and stances, given that you are in such an area, which means that we are not forcing you to take a particular stance, but we are forcing you to have an idea or an opinion about these things in the first place, which you think is broadly good. But second, the good second mechanism is internal, which is that you are going to be classmate with members of the student's body and often interact with them, right? The body will often ask for your if they to collect the stance from the student body, whether that vote for good or for one for yes or for no on a particular issue. But beyond that, though, specifically student bodies and the politicization of it has the incentive to educate and inform people and have made policy more disintegrable and accessible, as well as provide mechanism for how students' interests can be represented through mechanism within the school. This is clearly important because there's no natural incentive for the disconnected elite to care about the masses absent politicization. But beyond that, even if we don't completely make the elite switch to our side, at least our policies become better because voters are more informed and political, and the elite themselves are also threatened because more effort people aspire to be the politician or leaders themselves. So the competition in numbers is far better on the opposition. At the end of this speech, writ large, we identify two gigantic benefits. The first is that while we protect a uniquely vulnerable group and give them more political power, which as I already said, give you access to better policy for minorities, which give you better access to policy for things like protecting education and even the environment and mass vaccination, as government says. But now they have more power, which means things like this become more persuasive. But second is that we also unlock a unique group of people who would otherwise be apathic for the right of the masses, negate.
Okay, thank you so much for that speech. Now I call upon the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Hi, just checking. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, thank you. If you have any POI, feel free to wait a second. If you have any POI, feel free to unmute your mic and share my speech. I won't be able to see through the chat box. Thank you. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. One piece of clarification before moving to my whole response then. Why then, under yours of the house, if you go demonstrate to the street, then you have to bring your university name, right? We don't get why then. This is a burden that opposition side have to prove to in this debate in order for them to win. Few response here. First, on how then the idea of students are the one who actually could go to the streets because they have the spirit and etc., right? First, this is untrue. Notice there's a problem within the labor protection law, for example. There's the community for it, or if we're talking about minorities, there's like a progressive community for it, right? We think then there will be no urgencies coming from their side of the house to simply just go to the street and demonstrate and etc., like what they have proven to you before, right? But then why this is better under our side of the house is because under our side of the house, the one who will demonstrate, the one who will defend themselves in this case is the people is actually grieving, for example, is the people who actually get the harms from the policy itself, right? This shows you then the likelihood of the government will actually listen to it will be so much bigger under our side of the house, right? Because the one who actually demonstrate is the people who actually feel the sadness, feel the harms in the end of the day. We think that in the best case scenario that these people win under their side of the house, the result will not be certain as what we actually give to you in this debate, right? On how then government will see, oh, the one who actually demonstrating is the student. We think that this is not really urgent. Okay, just give them the winning. Then we will do like the last thing that we could, right? We think that this will be so bad under their side of the house simply because the problem that we are fighting for is something urgent, for example, right? But if then the outcome is not that tangible or that certain or that good in the end of the day, we think then for what we go demonstrate to the street in the end of the day, right? We think then this will be so much harmful under their side of the house. Even if this worst case scenario exists, we think then this worst
that society is getting more and more progressive in the status quo. That shows you that people will not just stay quiet when they see someone is oppressed out there, right? When they feel that government is not doing the right thing, in the end of the day, check and balance still happens under our side of the house. We think then this kind of scenario will not happen under our side of the house. Second here, I'm going to talk about how then the idea of discussion will likely happen under their side of the house, right? First point here. Social media and social movements still exist under our side of the house. Notice that my PM Rachel has stated to you before on how then, under our side of the house, if these students still wanted to shout out their voice, they could go to social movement and demonstrate with them without taking the university name in the end of the day, right? We then still allow them to actually follow those kind of social movement and giving their voices through social media by not being later on, by not bringing the name of the university, for example. This shows you that discussion is not just exclusive under their side of the house, because then we prove to you why then we're not taking the freedom of speech from the university students then. Because then, as an institution, we think we need to be neutral in the end of the day, because inside an institution there must be a lot of people from a lot of spectrum. This shows you that the diversity of people is actually exists, right? That the different ways to actually seize the problem in the end of the day, we think this won't happen. This is not exclusive under their side of the house, right? We think that under their side of the house, what will happen is they actually make the people that have the different choice will have to support the choice that is what majority wants in the end of the day, right? This is harmful then. Why? Because the fact that they are forced to actually change how their view to actually use this kind of thing, we think this is harmful. Yes, POI.
Name 5 successful social movements in Indonesia.
Like, if then you're questioning about how then the social, okay, let's just talk about how developing country here, how then people, protecting Papuan people, for example, right? Or like people who actually demonstrate for RUU PKS, for example, right? On how then now RUU PKS already exists under the status quo. Like environmentalists also exist under our side of the house. Feminist movement also exists, right? On how then that is why RUU PKS disahkan, right? This is why then the feminist movement shows to you that this actually have a really benefit under our side of the house, right? Okay, let's just move on to the next points here. I'm going to talk about how then the idea of students, the university students, also have opinion in the end of the day. This is basically the same, right? On how then these people are not trapped in an echo chamber, or they are not trapped and we're isolating them to actually cannot shout out their voice. What we don't want is to actually make them go down to the street and demonstrate with the university name in the end of the day, right? Because we think that stigmatization will exist and etc. On how then the characterization, I've stated to you before, that institutions should be neutral in the end of the day, right? Because how then different spectrum exists on how then different discussion, people from different people coming from minority and majority exist in that institution. We think then this is not justified to actually make them, to actually force them to have the same voice as what this executive want in the end of the day, right? We think that if they want to actually go demonstrate to the street, we think we will still give them the freedom of that, but the fact that we don't want them to take the name of the university, this is what you have to point out. Let's move on to the next point here on how then they will fight for their own. Okay, this idea was brought by the LO before, right? This is totally assumptive coming from their side of the house. My PM has stated to you before, then if you want to support and shout out your voice, then there is social media, there is social movement that exists under the status quo. We think that those kind of, the idea of fighting alone, going down the street and literally being just alone with no people behind you will not actually happen under our side of the house, right? But what makes us better is we give them, if the one who is in our back is the one who feels the same, right? Who feel relatable with the problem. Because if you have the better understanding of the problem, the better it will be, because it creates the more urgencies for the government to actually to actually solve this kind of problem in the end of the day, right? We think that this is very important because then this is a problem. For example, this is an urgent problem, then you have to solve it urgent as well. We proudly oppose this motion. Propose.
Okay, thank you so much for that fine speech. Now I call upon the deputy leader of opposition. You're there.
I am audible.
Yes, you are.
Chris, can I go to the bathroom for a minute, please?
Oh, okay. Then, boleh kok, Kak. Then if Kak just already back to the Zoom, please remind us, yeah, and notice us. And for the LO, please wait for Kak Jess, yeah.
Hi, sorry, I'm back. Thank you.
Okay, because Kak Jess is back, deputy leader of opposition, you can start your speech.
All right. Group of genders, you're here. If you have any POI, just unmute yourself. Several of them respond to the DPM, right? Firstly, they told you that social movement exists. Number one, they don't prove to you why is it enough, right? Considering the size and polarized age demographic, especially in Indonesia or other developed countries. Name 10 effective social movement in Indonesia. If you cannot prove the efficacy of your claim. But secondly, even if you buy this claim, the comparative is that they never told you why young political people would want to join social movement in the absence of students' body from the first place. We told you by having students' body, we get more political information, more buy-in, and more interest towards the political issues. We enable Trump's benefits only by our mechanism. Second of all, these DPM is so weird, right? Because realize they say it's just people fight are only the one that braving one. For example, the minorities one. Then why this is so bad? Because it is just very small judge. You want the trans community to fight for themselves? No, literally, because literally their claims let people who suffer demonstrate by themselves. If they talk about the social media, then I think several responses, right? The first one is social media has a little buying status quo because the youth is a apolitical status quo, and that is why we want to send incentive for them. The second of all, honors of the House, we prove to you all of that in real second argument with no response at all from them. I think it's too late to respond to the whip. Real proof to you why our structural mechanism and the fact that we are the one that who can strengthen at all. But going to the friendly debate, right? The first of all, right? I think the representation is best at is a wash because they also want social movement groups that have different kind of view. That means you also have like this different representation. That means their principles actually at best not exclusive. Therefore, they have no harm. What is the only argument that lacks in is that the mitigations that exist on their side, right? Number one, mitigation of social movement exists. Two responses. Number one, Leo asked them name only social movement successful in Indonesia and the POI, Kyla, literally spot and pulse because they don't know, which means the social movement is effective. Comparatively on our side, the house, we told you a lot of like in the Philippines or even Indonesia, like UI or again actually really effective in status quo. For example, like demonstrating about the omnibus law, like literally RUU PKS, they never engage with that response. But second of all, what social movement that literally want to go in the street in Indonesia, wanna we hear news in the BAM, UGM, or UI that fight for the politicians, it is because they want to give like their energy and their time just because going to the church comparatively on their side of the house. There are examples like online social movement. I mean, like no process at all why online social movements are likely to be success just for the online on your side of the house. And the fact that we prove to you the comparative on your side of the house people or like students still want to fight for their political ideology, but they're not actually in a some of groups. They have less leverage on your side and less voting blocks on your side of the house, and that is why government don't want to hear them, right? Even if you don't buy that, we are far more better in scale. We have a bigger benefits. Why? And if you just like they just say that minority can fight for themselves, like what? And you may just start fighting for their own. How could they stay alive? How political parties stay? Additionally, though, they never get to real argument about more voting blocks because the fact that youth are the majority in the Indonesia itself. That is why we have better defense and better care powerful towards the government to care with us. But overall, I think if it's true proportion counterfactual, you can give opinion outside of college. But this is bad because we see them as a random students and activists with no power of leverage because they cannot aggregate interest in their government, right? So if the mechanism of government is that politicians will care about students anyway, we see this mechanism to get more representation exist on our side of the house by being able to aggregate them together exclusively on our side of the house where you politicize this group at the end of the day. With that being said, too, I will pattern two issues against two winning issues that government is contingent on, which are firstly, where we are better for societal development and policy in developing countries. Second of all, which one better for the students, right? Number one, I don't understand what point will they actually want to take in the first place, right? We strongly stand with our student executive because we prove to you that it works better on our side of the house. The first thing they say is that the echo chamber exists beyond this issue because demonstrations by ban. Choice does not exist where you don't want to join the student executive. Number one, I mean, you also have choices this in the student body. Knowing is that organization, you will discuss first whether or not you need to demonstrate or not, whether like you're be critical. For example, you have debate inside of the organizations and it's obvious, right? But second of all, I think mostly students want to join because of a reason. Number one, because student unions don't have to use university name like you characters in DPM. Like we give you, for example, your speech that aren't like representing the school. They happen to be composed of students within the school, which still counts as a student union, right? But secondly, our side has several, right? If your side still have university influencing for the administration, influencing the students' unions of university on their side, then on their side, some university will still be seen as the bastion for the ideological breeding from the government, right? What we do is by making it out on the open, we have such more political students who are fighting and they're competing for the political interest. But see, I think lastly, you just don't have to join like you are not forced to become a body supporter. If you join school that is run by the body supporters, at the end of the day, this response and then their first issue, then on the face it's far better on the politics and the rest of the house. Second of all, they say that BAM is not powerful, like student activities is not powerful, right? Number one, they're vulnerable, right? Because the fact that significant in voting block, if it is through DPM and Gulf Sweep, then it is just true as well on the house. Then we get like some allies to listen for us. We don't get significant power in our side of the house if we form student unions, which is are more palatable, are able to get more resources and able to get more support within the school. But second of all, in terms of governance, they say how people are fighting for issue and not nature of the issue per se. This is not what PM say. This is explicitly said that they want to be more political issues because the fact that they also want to do that outside of the college. Yes, PI.
Why is it so important to bring your university name like for the representation? Because you're still going to be seen as a bunch of uni students going unwise under your side.
No, number one is no nothing. Like we never think that you need to bring your university name, but the point is that you are a group in one political movement that is actually the students. That the methods of fighting is far better and far worse on your side of the house because number one, if you don't aggregate more incentive for student government, this is where you are likely to be more radical because only a few passionate students are able to independently realize. But even if you're not radical, you're still likely to representative on your side of the house because the whole student population, and therefore that is still where in the terms of the kinds of interest that you pour toward the political groups. Second of all, again, students become more vulnerable if you agree that if they are vulnerable on both sides of the house. It is a worse government on the government because they are more dispersed groups, vulnerable to abuse and vulnerable to courting, like the fact that government are easier to crack down on you, government are easier to, for example, shoot the students on your side of the house the moment you stand alone and something like that. Other forums still exist, such as media and social movement. Number one, we have touched and cleared that argument. Media, I don't know why would they bring this notice that in order for people to get better of their actions, it's by us directly gather and fight for it. And also, we offer to you that media provides little buy-in. Comparatively, we are forced these students actually buying into the social issues proud to oppose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that fine speech. Now, I call upon the government whip. Here.
Check, am I audible?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, gender pronoun, we hear him. PI preference, just unmute yourself. I would definitely accept one before the second part of my speech. Give me a second, I'm going to drink first. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Esther is so ridiculous. She answered Rachel's POI by saying that, oh, we don't bring the name of the university. If they do not bring the name of the university, what is the purpose of BM then? You can be a random guy showing up on the street. It doesn't have to be in the form of BM. If she cannot answer this, then it means that our whole point about unfair representation and whatnot actually still stands towards the very end of the day. Two questions then. Number one is about the principle. Secondly, is about the practical analysis. What even if they do demonstrate, what is the implication of it and why is it still not sustainable, right? First thing first about principle. Three metrics we posed. Number one is about urgency. We told you the demonstration about a certain issue are already handled by the body that are connected to it in Rachel, right? How labor protection will be protected by labor union, minorities protection will be protected by progressive social movement, like how the movement to protect Papuan people do exist in Indonesia. There is no urgency to include an institution that has no connection towards the issue to demonstrate as well. Even if it is not enough, students can still join demonstration if they feel related to the issues. The incentive exists because number one, students who join BAM are likely to be the one who cares about policy implementation. So with or without BAM, they will still find a way to vocalize their political view and whatnot. They're likely to join like political party or progressive social movement under our side of the house and whatnot. Secondly, if we're talking about the students outside of BAM who do not care about political condition, with or without BAM demonstrating, they would probably do not care anyway. So this is not an important actor to be catered as it to be. But I think eventually the urgency does not exist because those kind of other entities do exist to protect the right of each individual. But secondly, and most importantly, about choice, right? We argue that it is even better under our side because we give choice to these individuals inside BAM to decide on their own whether they are interested in joining demonstration about an issue or not. Compared to your side, when a BAM already agreed to demonstrate to government about omnibus law, for example, every member of the BAM are forced to join demonstration regardless of their personal view because they are already a member of that organization. This is likely because when BAM demonstrates, they want to include as many members as possible so that their advocacy is seen as more credible with the government. Therefore, the principle of choice are actually not fulfilled because they still force the member of BAM who do not really agree with the value that they should demonstrate under their side. Furthermore, and most importantly, BAM is the image of university and the voice of university. Every member of the university is connected to what BAM support and what BAM oppose. If a BAM support a cause, there's a certain preconceived notion that the whole student, lecturer, and basically everyone who has the same view as BAM actually support it as well. Consequences are going to be felt by the whole university. For example, criticism to whole Universitas Indonesia student who exists when BAM posted about Jokowi as king of lip service. Every single one of them criticized it, right? This is unjustified because those individuals who are from other political spectrum do not even agree to the post. They don't even agree to the demonstration done by BAM, but they're also getting the harm of being shamed because they are related to the university to begin with. Compared to the issues about tertiary education, it is usually relates to the interest of the citizen, right? And most of the time, the options are really distinct. One policy that benefits students, and another one which harm them. Spectrums and universities are going to be so saturated that therefore the protection or the advocacy that are done by this kind of BAM are still going to fulfill what the society demanded to begin with, right? Or even if it is not going to be fulfilling the political spectrum, the urgency exists because we're talking about tertiary education. There is no one else who advocates for it. So then the urgency to actually advocate for tertiary policy still exists. That is why the justification for BAM to do this kind of thing do exist. What did you get a response? You try to say about how we limit participation, right? Notice panel that the reason why age limitation exists in political party and whatnot is because BAM are still allowed to show their political stance in the current status quo. Under our side of the house, when BAM are not allowed to do this kind of thing anymore, there will be more incentive for political party or progressive movement to accommodate to this need. This looks like how there will be more younger students joining political party or progressive movement, since it is the only way for them to represent their vocal political views. They brought an irrelevant point about radical group. I think that's very much unlikely because we're talking about individuals who are most likely to be open-minded, who are included in a lot of discussion, and their political politically aware, I don't think they're likely to join radical group, especially when alternatives like political party or progressive movement exist under our side of the house. I don't get any analysis why they would choose radical group instead of political party or progressive movement. Therefore, I don't think they will up to that kind of radical choices towards the very end of the day. But another interesting point they told you is about democracy, right? I do not think this democracy is a valid metric to begin with, because the consequence is going to be felt by the whole student of that institution. I think even if it is untrue, let's just directly weigh the vulnerable actor. I think the most vulnerable actor are the individuals who are not represented by the action of the BM activity. It looks like a student who supports Jokowi, but their BM posted Jokowi as king of lip service. This individual is judged and shamed by society simply because they have same school affiliation with the BM who posted it to begin with. This vulnerable individual has no coping up mechanism, because obviously moving university simply because of political issue is not feasible since it is so expensive, and their parents will not agree to it. They still need to access education, but it comes at an expense of them being shamed for something they do not even consented to begin with. Compared to vulnerable actors they promote, vocal students who won't get platform and whatnot, alternative for them exists, ladies and gentlemen. They can join political party, progressive social movement, and whatnot. Or even if this claim is untrue, this kind of vocal politician or vocal student not being able to be vocal gives no harm at all to the implementation of policy. Because 10 people speaking up won't change a governmental policy compared to this vulnerable actor who gets shamed because of their BM making questionable political stance, who could manifest into them losing their self-confidence, losing impacting their mental health condition, because they're actually going to be shamed all the time because of this blunder done by their BM to begin with. I think the more vulnerable actor is the innocent individuals who are affiliated because they do not have any other coping up mechanism, while this kind of vocal students still have other mechanisms like political party and whatnot. Therefore, we protect the most vulnerable actor in this kind of principle justification, which champion this. Another weighing, another metric why we also win is because we give you more choices and we show you that the urgency for this kind of advocacy does not exist. Before we move to a second flash experience POI. Once, twice, 3 times, yes. Oh no, okay. I assume they agree. Second, let's talk about the practical analysis, right? What is the implication of this riot? This is where Rachel's analysis becomes important. Even if they do the riot under their side of the house, it is less likely for bills they promoted to be passed either. Because number one, government see no relatability within the university BM with the issue. For example, like it lessens the urgency to pass the bills. Of course, government are more likely to feel empathetic when a group of Papuan people demonstrating for their right rather than some random group of UI or UGM students who do not have any relatability to begin with. Even if the movement are not filled by full Papuan people, but at least they still show that they are supporting exclusively for the Papuan cause and the relatability is there. But secondly, BM of lots of universities are already seen with bad reputation because of the problematic stance they take. Like for example, because of the Jokowi king of lip service thing and whatsoever. The comparison on the our side is that we use the original progressive movement, which has more likely to be passed since the relatability exists. They also it's already fixed, by the way. Echo chamber of political discussion. This is something that's not debated by them at all. They try to say that youth is a potential voting bloc. Exactly. We do not want them to be stuck in an echo chamber of political policy. This is where Rachel's unresponded analysis becomes extremely important. It's too late for their whip. BM have a massive bargaining power in university. They are the one who students look up to. If they support a policy, discussion at university will also be an echo chamber supporting the policy. It means that the people or the students who are politically unaware are likely to follow the stance of the BM simply because it's an echo chamber at the university. It's going to be worse under your side because all of the younger generation can easily be swayed away by the stance of BM because of the massive bargaining power they own. Education institutions should always be neutral because education is a basic need of society. It is something you must have access to it. But if it comes in expense of sacrificing a political ideology and getting swayed because of an echo chamber you cannot deny, it is a big burden they need to take. Why is it justified? Because other mechanisms to promote also exist. We're proud to win this debate.
Okay, thank you so much for that speech. I call upon the opposition whip. Here.
Hi, just making sure I'm audible, right?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Sorry, just making sure my notes are in order. Okay. This way. Oh shoot. Sorry, let me just get my timer. Okay, sorry about that. I will start my speech. in 3, 2, 1. A few clarifications, okay? You misheard what my second speaker said, okay? On our case, we are bringing the university's name, okay? My first and second speaker tells us this, and even reliant on the fact that we represent the university as their students, right? This is something inevitable, of course. We take that burden, right? But remind you that my first and second speaker gave you the mitigations with our benefits, why this is much safer rallies and why this is a much better planning, right? They also like their whip tells us that like it is like much harmful for us to like use their university's name. They're so like tangible on that, right? Also, understand that this is not exclusive because even though you don't use like the yellow UI jacket, right? When a demo happens, you are still investigated, right? Notice that the media still sells the story, right? They want to get the clicks, right? So when you say that like, oh, mahasiswa UI, they do like demos, that will bring out stories, right? This is not exclusive insofar you can still be investigated, right? This is the difference that we are mining, right? Because number one, we are more structured because we have BFM, because we have the structured demonstration better and more targeted activism, right? And secondly, in case crackdown, we have more leverage to be able to protect these students, right? So regardless if you are still rallying against something, just not as a student, we say that if the university really cares about their name, then these students are still in danger because now they are under the radar because universities are so hyperly searching for anyone that might make their name back, okay? Now we're going to go into the rebuttals that I have from the government's case, right? Firstly, they talk about like how we're unable to represent the whole as and that's why it's so dangerous, right? So what is the alternative here, okay? So they express their opinions anonymously. Is that what they're trying to say? Suddenly they are unable to express their beliefs anymore, right? Because understand this is something that the government does not trade off. The fact that when you are a public figure, your standing is part of who you are. The government cannot take a soft stance and tell us that they're still able to advocate. It's not as exclusive bodies, student bodies, right? They say that you need to take the trade off. These students as a whole are not able to fight for their opinion, or at least fight for their opinions themselves anymore because of this ban, right? Notice they are also still students. Regardless of what you think, students are still a much smaller power compared to other political groups, right? When we band together, that's exactly when we have the power. Why are these political groups so afraid of students calling them out for political actions and advocating for change? We see this as a restriction of freedom of speech, especially when their future are in the hands of other people that they're trying to advocate against, right? So even then, representation is not something that you can absolutely do. We say that the majority choice is okay. 5 minutes, sorry. The choice is that choice that affects the most amount of people. Thus, it's seen as the problem that effectively harms the most in society themselves, right? Secondly, they talk about how it is unfair for student bodies to have the power to have like a bigger platform and thus like bigger influence, right? Okay, two things I want to say to that, why that is actually beneficial for us to actually allow BM students to actually like announce their voices, right? Because number one, student bodies are still made up of students, right? It's unlikely for them to influence so many students like they said, because let's be real, people are not that naive. People are not going to willingly follow someone, especially when you are at the same grade and the same level as them and you actively vote for them to be in student body, right? Secondly, let's say like something let's see this as something like beneficial. Why? Because when you ban speaking out, you're unable to ban people from having you cannot ban people from having beliefs, right? We say that this is much more harmful because now student body have access to connections to students, student bodies still have access to funding, student bodies still have support from different political groups, but now anonymously, right? It is more dangerous because now you don't know who you are voting for. Now you don't know who you elect to these places, right? Now since you ban these people from expressing their political groups, you don't have the representation that believes in anti-LGBTQ community or like openly racist behind the scenes, right? You don't know what their political understanding is, so you don't get that check and balance if you were to allow them to actually speak out. And thirdly, they talk about like how it's untrue that students were like rallying in the streets, right? Okay, number one, you need to understand that the people who are rallying are the people who suffer. That's what they said, right? That's their alternative. So they're like, oh, it's not the students that are rallying, it's the people that are affected, right? Understand that is already a small majority. What do I mean by this? Because number one, openly admitting that you are poor, abused, or not doing well, that is already something that is hard to admit, especially if you want to go against a rally that you don't have further connections for at the end, right? You don't have a group of people to rely on, so you have to openly do it yourself. Also, secondly, that is so dangerous. You don't have the number of people to do so, right? The size of a rally means that you expect exactly that you have the allies, and also like this goes against because now there are no allies in these movements, right? So the number of people have like bigger urgency, so you mediate that, and suddenly it's gone, right? Also, secondly, let me talk about why social mood. Okay, go ahead.
If there's not enough people in that social movement, why couldn't the university people actually join the social movement since they do not have any kind of platform to be vocal? We have provided this analysis.
Well, from what you said, the universities are already so tangible. They're already like scared of these things, right? They're already like, oh,
they're already like scared for their student body, and they already like care about their image, right? Exactly why we believe that BAM have the like executive ability to do so and prepare for like better rallies, why they're so much more effective, right? Also, secondly, let's talk about why social media isn't enough, right? Because they say that is like the alternative. They still have like the big policy, because you are one person. Because understand that like if you are doing social media, you're one person against one big policy, right? You don't have that numbers. Notice how social media is not enough when compared to rallies, right? Rallies are big. Rallies bring urgency because they are big, because they are an inconvenience to people who are there protesting against, right? Whether that be standing outside of the office with like a bunch of banners or chanting or like protesting on the streets, we say that it brings the attention to these things, right? And we're only allowed to have a safer rally if we are allowed to have like good preparations for this, right? We say that media isn't enough. Media as a whole can only be able to like connect other people, right? That what is the point of having like the same mindset without actually acting upon it, right? The alternative of having social media in Indonesia, let's play on that, okay? Understand that students don't have time to organize social media as a whole with society. This is why we do not see like I'm not protesting on the streets merely because they have accepted their future. There is no urgency for their generation to rally, right? The students are different than that. They have student body managing these rallies to guarantee that they are safe, to align them with their schedules along with many other students, right? They have that capability to have information. They also have more access to information that issues that are ourselves cannot be, they are unable to get, right? Also note that in Indonesia, it is still conservative, like older generations understanding what is right or wrong. At this point, they already have conceded to that. Exactly why we believe that students are the ones that still care and they still want to be prospering in their future, right? Notice that the chat also like there are like two questions that they haven't answered in our speech, right? They did not respond as to how their side of the house are still able to like bring representation and to like smaller and oppressive groups, right? And also they did not talk about how like change will actually happen in political parties when we already told you that the citizens themselves are not enough when we're trying to advocate for this, right? Notice that challenging authorities and arguments is an important aspect of political change, right? We say that mahasiswa are the direct future of our nation, right? We say that regardless of their political views, they're the ones that directly serve the contribution to our country, right? Once you are a mahasiswa, that is when you are beginning your life as an adult, right? You suddenly have the ability to change. Now you have the ability, the power to influence what you want to do in the future and how your future turns out, right? Because number one, they have more influence over the media. They have the ability to attract more people. They have the ability to band together. They have the ability to expose corrupt politicians. They also have the ability to connect with more people, right? They also have a new set of values and new set of expectations depending on the generation. It's important for us to uphold those values depending on the generation, which while also having a solid group that is able to protect you when something happens, right? We are still student bodies. We do not have a lot of influence on our own. We say that exclusive bodies are the ones that are representing us and the initial power to band students together under one cause, right? They have the ability to do so. Exactly why we win on this class, exactly why our like exclusive benefit, you are able to see change. You are able to have them advocating on our side of the house for different policy problems. So proud to oppose. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for that fine speech. Now, I call upon the opposition reply here.
But before that, may I have the permission to go to the toilet first before I start my reply speech? I'm sorry, may I go to the toilet first before I start my
Sorry,
opposition reply
sure,
speech?
sure. I forgot to unmute myself, but I answered
Okay,
already.
thank you. All right, thank you. All right, I'm back. Sorry for taking that so long. To confirm, am I audible again?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, thank you. If you listen closely to proposition, right, they are playing dirty. Rachel argued about representation and mitigation. Kyla's speech is all mitigation, and their wit suddenly came up with all these ideas about harming other students within that university when you use university's name, right? Even if I know judges, you won't credit new material from wit, I am still going to show you in two classes why we win this debate. First class, very quickly on representation. I want to know representation is a WASP because they all stand for groups that rally on streets. As long as you don't use university's name, this means all your harms on democracy about not catering to interests of everyone still happens insofar as you still group. Furthermore, if we told you it's never possible to make everyone happy, doesn't mean we should not act. Parliaments comprise of different votes. Doesn't mean we should not vote for a policy that's obviously important, right? Kyla and Dennis know they are losing on this school. That's why they drop it, right? Let's talk about Dennis' new material. This harms students in the same university. We told you two crucial things that bit this. First, Imonic, we question why this is mutually inclusive. On your side of the house, they support groups joining really as a group, just not use university name. But we told you again, you can still be investigated, especially media's incentive to make spicy headlines. It will be much more catchy to frame the news as, for example, mahasiswa UI menampar politisi. So at the end of the day, the harm of image for other students is metric. Second, though, we told you the comparative on your side of the house is really, really worse. Why? This one person who gets caught up as a UE student, for example, it's harder for him to justify his action. So it harnesses the name further. In contrast, though, when BAM incites violence as an organization, you can publish a public letter justifying what you did, clarification that can tarnish university name, for example, etc. Thirdly, we told you when individual students group amongst themselves or demonstrate among themselves because there's no coordination. We told you in BAM we can moderate demonstration as a group, as a strategist, and also be targeted in activists and etc. etc. And also, though, second class tweet side accumulates better change on our on this side of the house. We told you in my speech then why we get better leverage to change policy. On your side of the house, though, there's no fear why you acting as independent activists will be solid in terms of gaining buy-in. Notice that this separation is true because they have no mechanism of solidarity at this point in time. It was on our side before, where you can make them a relevant voting bloc. They become a political concern to traditional politicians because this is what I've already explained to you before in my first speaker's case. First, there are a lot of them. There are many students in the country, but second, they are the most ideologically motivated. They are more likely to go to door, be outspoken, most likely to influence the individual's proximity to them. But also third, even if they aren't gigantic voting bloc, they can also become a swing voting bloc, and therefore politicians will still be changing the platform and policy to guarantee that the few presented points that the vote has, right? But lastly, this is the most important. I would suggest that this group have a very, very special discursive power on our side house. Notice that there are different mistakes that also came from proposition side of the house. First, the benefits and harms are both non-exclusive. What they stand is basically fighting without bringing any university name, right? We don't understand why on your side of the house, by following the mechanism you said, will bring us any benefit and representative from the place. Notice that their claim is only about using media becomes an activist or whatsoever. Proposition, we have already rebutted all the mechanisms you brought up to us, and we say that none of them actually can bring us any exclusive benefit. Unlike our side of the house, where we already explained to you so many structural reasons as to why this student, for example, student executive, is able to get more followers and buy-in that further provides more urgency for authoritarianism, for example, or for the bad guy to stop any action to cut off people's place to fall out. But on your side of the house, also, the only benefit, like they told us, is that university names are not butter. Firstly, what's the point and deal with university name if the students, for example, that don't represent their voice and give up their opinions or even challenge the government and change policy? I think that the benefits of our side of the house are more certain in compared to them, because I still don't understand. I still don't understand how by keeping a university name, for example, can gain more voices being heard and whatsoever. Then it says about social movement and whatsoever about joining social movement. How social movements are not strong enough. They don't tell us why social movement is effective, especially in Indonesia, right? Many crackdowns on the social movement. We told you why BAM is really, really uniquely better. First, because given that it's a run and coordinated by youth, there's a great sense of relatability based on age demographic. It mitigates the age demographic concern that it says. But also second, there's more of an incentive for student leaders or student body leaders to ask for your political leading, especially because you are the constituency. And third, it's very accessible to you because it's in your university house, so you are not going to be really, really go to half risk. No, you cannot say just doing such a movement. No, you cannot assert and co-op. We told you three such a reasons on why BAM is unique and why students already have their own as a body, a security body. For all these reasons, we proudly oppose.
Okay, thank you so much for that speech. Now I call upon the government reply. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Is never an issue of minority students left unrepresented in student executive body. Rather, the problem that the body is going for, what the problem that this body is going for does not directly impact the student. Then why should you bring your university's name and risk your time and effort to go demonstrate in the streets for these students at the end? Opposition lost at the beginning of this debate when it never explained to you why representation comes exclusively from student executive body. That is the reason why they lost. The comparative is that we join other social movement or we talk about politics and social media not to go rioting alone, versus opposition who only wants student executive body who does not represent the entire student at the end of the day. Instead, the reply speech, they only want to bring late responses, how they want to protect choices of vulnerable actors, echo chamber, and whatnot that shouldn't be credited inside the speech. At the end of the day, they go full rebutting when they didn't explain anything inside op-ed. What is the question in this debate on the matter of representation and why it's better on proposition? I think the main premise from opposition is to say that if student executive body can't express their political views, then out of a sudden, no one can talk about politics. 3 main points of analysis. I think firstly, it is completely illogical, right? We're not restricting the construction of student executive body. We're just restricting them to go on riots for issues that does not correlate with tertiary education. I think opposition needs to make it more clear on what stance are they going for. Exactly when it's not tangible, opposition is only going to come up and say that, oh, students need to go on riot because it's their voice. But then again, there's zero manifestation as to why their alternative is going to be better. That proves to you the opposition case is not important. But secondly, then they come up and tell you and say that you need student executive body so that you won't go rioting alone. Age demography is not an important idea at all because the movements and organizations are fighting for the same goal. No one cares if you're older or younger. They will still go do riots anyway, exactly because they want to project their own grievances and exactly because they want to change the policy or even to change the political party's view at the end of the day. They kill their own case when DLO comes up and say that people won't care if a random bunch of students comes rioting. That's the exact case for student executive body, right? But even worse, when DLO tells you that they won't bring the university's name, then why should anyone listen to you? Leverage and bargaining power would only be eradicated. You don't get any of the benefits of representation or even political awareness, exactly because no one knows who you are. Then why should they listen to you? But thirdly, then on students who don't care and are not interested in politics. Look, if people don't care about politics, they won't join the student executive body as well, even if it exists under their side, right? That's not a burden that we need to defend. But on the contrary, if opposition never answers the burden on why it's okay to strip other people's opinion on political view, this is very important here. Exactly because I told you the education institutions are supposed to stay neutral. If youth have a large capacity to vote, they should vote under their own consent, not because it is driven by these student executive body. But that option won't exist under side opposition when the student executive body will only lead every single discussion, solidifying the political echo chamber that you have. However, zero responses from opposition. I think this argument still stands at the end of the debate. Comparatively, under our of the House, we open up the freedom of choice for the students to actually pick and actually represent their own voices when they want to join other social movements, for instance, right? When they are not forced on behalf of student executive body, it's even better because their voices are based on their own thoughts. If you want to talk about minorities, join progressive social movement. If you want to talk about controversy claims, social media also exists for you to talk about it. The 3 main reasons as to why this is going to be much better. Firstly, because there's a correlation of tertiary education, then at the very least, we still get more relatability from the student for government to listen. But secondly, by joining other social movement, it's also better in compelling the government to change. Exactly when grievances are larger and more targeted, if social movement doesn't have enough manpower, then political local students are more likely to join them, since A, it's the only available platform for them to join, but B, because they are politically aware and they care about minority issues. But thirdly, then under their of the House, minority students will only be shamed for their opinion when it doesn't go in line with what these student executive body want. The wing is clear. Firstly, on the level of vulnerability, unrepresented student from the student executive body would be wiped away. But without student executive body, different political views are allowed under our side. This is where objective discussions can exist inside the university alone. Political awareness is better on side proposition. But secondly, then on the degree of leverage, they tell you that you don't have university background to support your voice. Their bargaining power falls very, very minimum. I don't think they can get any of their benefits. That is the reason as to why we're so proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that speech. Now, by the end of that speech, it marks also the end of the debate. Congratulations and appreciations for all of you for finishing the grand final rounds of this competition. So yeah, because this is obviously a silent round, everyone can do a virtual handshake. Thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, see you.